This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Boom. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. When I lived in Japan back in the 1980s, I was fortunate enough to have access to Gold's Gym. And I say fortunate enough because back in the 1980s, there wasn't a whole lot of real fancy stuff around. We were talking, literally talking barbells, dumbbells, it was a gym's gym sort of a thing. And I've always been an athlete. I was an athlete in school. I was a gymnast at the University of Oregon. Tried football when I was in high school, but I got blindsided. I didn't like getting hit. So I figured if I was going to hurt myself, I'd do it myself, which is where gymnastics came in. All that being said, working out, being able to actually position myself to be healthy, and working out has always been a part of that in my life. But being able to be healthy has been something that I've always paid attention to. And my guest today, Jim McPartland, he goes by Mac McPartland, is the author of an interesting series called the Unopened Gifts. And he's a performance coach. And I say performance coach, both from the health perspective, performance in that context, but also mindset. Just kind of how do you actually set yourself up to excel in life? And he's got a pretty interesting background. Over 25 years, he's worked with Bank of America, IBM, Nespresso, blah, blah, blah. I mean, fill in the blank. We've got a number of different folks that we could talk about, a number of different organizations we overlap on here. But I'm interested in the conversation about these unopened gifts. Just kind of what do we bring to the table? Who are we in our lives that makes a difference in people's lives? And that's true both as a leader in my life, but also as a leader in my organization. And what are the unopened gifts that we can actually facilitate exploring, for the people in our companies? We grow great companies by growing great people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of the name of the game. So, Mac, welcome to the show.
Blaine, fabulous introduction, my friend. I feel fortunate to be your guest, but I got excited by what you're going to talk about. I wish I was just watching. Right. So now
it's good. Oh, I said that? Really?
Yeah. Hey, you asked about, if I may, unopened gifts.
Please. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, my friend. And we speak about business, and as you mentioned, your time in Japan with the tank top on, right, in Gold's Gym.
Yep.
And I had what allowed me to pursue the work I'm pursuing is one of those 20-year overnight successes in the manufacturing space of exercise equipment. And as I think I mentioned to you earlier, I could tell you more how not to run one of those companies than how to run one. I guess like anything, right? We learn from the setbacks.
Yeah, it's called the dummy tax.
or the PhD, right? In DUMB is I am the Nobel laureate in that. And along the path, and really, as you touch on about the soul of business and human beings, one of the things I learned over time was we had a multinational company. We were hiring lots of people, and I had a closet full of Superman capes, an ego that had me carry pictures of myself in my wallet. I thought I was going to be the guy to get the world fit. Most of us likely recognize it's much more fun to get fat than get fit. It's more social.
Yep. It is more social.
We would go through this hiring process. For a while, I was involved in most every hire, and that became unfeasible after a while. But what I found was there was a period of time where we had a lot of people and they were excited. I was explaining the dream, and then I would see these data points of where people were leaving the company after a certain period of time. And I thought initially, hey, what's wrong with them? But what I recognized wasn't anything to do with them. It was me. I was selling people on my dream. I wasn't asking them about what was important to them and what did they want to be or grow up and what were their fears. And I had some investors who said, look, you can't talk to people about those things. And I thought to myself, but they're thinking about it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I learned the hard way that if I sought to meet people where they were, to understand what it is they wanted to get to, and if there was some way to align what they wanted for their life with where we were taking the business, if they could align those things, or we could help them align them, then likely we would maybe be more productive and or successful, because most of us are tuned into what's in it for me, right? WIIFM.
Mm-hmm.
And so Unopened Gifts, the long answer to your question, was a quest to understand what was the gift I had inside of me that I was afraid to tell people about, because I thought I was supposed to behave a certain way to hold this particular image. And I didn't want to get embarrassed or look foolish. So I'll become this person who's supposed to be the CEO and run it a specific way. But it was a bit of an identity crisis. There's who I was and who I wound up being. And the employees in the organization helped me see, man, it's when people have said to me over time, Blaine, you'd appreciate this. Hey, look, it's not personal, it's business. I think baloney. It's all personal if you're a person.
Yep.
And when I recognized I was a walk-on, like I am today in your movie and everybody else's movie, and that if I could help them progress, then likely it would get, I don't know if it's easier for me, but maybe smoother for me. So the gift was to help people be more of themselves and spend more time doing the things that they love to do, even if that meant shifting positions or leaving the company.
Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of that unopened gift, in my experience, and I've got 46 years, I think, just working with leadership development around with organizations around the world. Almost never are people asked, "What matters to you?" Yeah. Why are you here and not over there? What is it about being here that kind of lights your eyes up? And if they can't answer that question, and oftentimes they won't answer that and can't answer that because number one, they haven't been asked. But number two, the light has gone out. There's just, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? It's kind of like, well, why are you asking? All kinds of stuff comes into play here. We've ended up defining leadership as being the activity of influencing others, take command and control out of it, influencing others in order to co-create coordinated movement in pursuit of a worthy ideal. And that worthy ideal is not a vision. It's not the goals. It's not the objectives. It's not even the mission of the company. It's what matters to the people in the company. What matters? And if I can, if I've got 100 people in the company, I'll have 100 different what matters, articulated if I'm actually paying attention. What organizes that? That's where the power of the leader comes into play from a business perspective. And that's, I think, a transformative place to be. On your website, you've got a very interesting statement that the secret to transforming the uncomfortable into unstoppable growth. And that idea of being willing to step into discomfort has always fascinated me, because the most effective leaders I've ever run into are the ones that are willing to not be right. They're willing to be uncomfortable in the exploration of, where do we go from here? How does that gel, or does it gel with your experience in building your organizations and working with the clients with whom you work?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, Blaine. Maybe like many, or a young lad who's maybe less young now, but maybe we're all young until we go slide across the finish line. I think I had these aspirational views of being a courageous and bold leader, and maybe courage has its place in society. And it's often we look up to individuals that maybe have this superpower or something unique or a gear that we don't have. And what I learned, or have been reminded of, is courage doesn't feel good. And I think what snaps us back to our comfort zone, for lack of a better phrase, is, hey, we get, in business specifically, we get rewarded for what we're good at. We get recognized, we get compensation, we get commission, we get bonus every 2 weeks, also known as paychecks. We want to belong to particular tribes. To step out of that doesn't feel good. And I risk judgment and exposure. And what if I make a mistake? And it's that fear of what other people think of me, I think, that paralyzes us. And I also have come to recognize, or the hard way, that people hear what they see. So it's one thing for me to say, come on, be courageous, be bold. But that doesn't mean much to people unless there's a bit of a how-to to go along with it. Here's some of the behaviors. And if I didn't have the chance to stand in the front with a whiteboard and say, this looks like, then it was how I engaged each and every day. And to do something you just pointed to, have the courage to say, I don't know.
Right. I'm figuring it out too.
and that's a lot better place to be than I've got this sorted out and give some baloney answer. And I would go back and often in my case, go back into my office and sort of lay on the floor going, hoping nobody knows I don't know what I'm doing. But they did. Right?
Yeah, there are no secrets in the universe.
And as you say, co-create, doesn't matter where people are on the org chart. Everyone's a teacher and everyone's a student, right? And if one can, I had to learn to be humble enough to realize just because I was in a box on a piece of paper on an org chart, I wasn't any more special. I just had different responsibilities, right? And it takes, a village or a company or payroll, right, to drive an organization.
Yeah. That in the unopened gift piece, I want to just kind of make sure Jenna, because I'm fascinated by what you're working with there. You've actually positioned this as a series, the unopened gift series. Can you talk about the serial nature of what that is and how you actually use it with your clients?
Yeah, thank you. It was my belief at the time this started that, the imposter syndrome, who am I to write a book? Mm-hmm. I had that meeting with myself many times. And only was probably the birth of children or being courageous to say, well, who am I not to write it? And what I thought was, or still believe, that I think we learn more from story than from here's are the 5 steps, follow this to victory. Maybe there's some of that that's applicable. It wasn't in my case. Mine was pretty curly on the climb. And so the series was to create a corporate environment in this story, key character, whom is in pursuit of let's call it the brass ring, the American dream. And along that path almost loses everything he has because he doesn't realize what he has. It's always what's next, what's next, what's next. And you get to meet the people in his organization, from the sales leader, the HR leader, the manufacturing leader. And I'm hopeful and have been hopeful that people who are in the business world will read the story and recognize themselves in one of the characters and say, wow, yeah, me too. In that the key character, and I will say this story is based on the life of yours truly. The names were changed to protect the innocent and the guilty.
They usually are, yeah.
And to stumble along the way thinking one had to have all the answers and realize that, hey, maybe the one who had all the answers got nailed to a cross. We don't know if he had all the answers, right? That failing forward was probably the way to go. So the series was, here's how this individual almost loses everything: family, children. It was more about trophies and market share and margin. Not that that's not important, but for the most part, you got to have it, right? It's building a business, but people were leaving along the way because it wasn't about them. It was all about him. Mm-hmm. So you see that journey and you realize he has that aha moment and some therapy, some coaching to help him through it. And to suddenly see his employee population a little bit differently when there's illness that happens, when there's theft that happens, when there's setback that happens, who he needs to be in those situations where it could be command and control power that you spoke about earlier, or it could be, let me understand what's going on here. Not that these behaviors are going to be good, but if I meet people where they're at, maybe my first conclusion might not be the right one. And maybe there's some different choices or decisions I'll make. So the series is to follow the individual through a journey of his growth and evolution, the evolution and growth of the people, which is most important, and how the particular characters in the story build off of the learning of the main character, who you see his changes take place. He's leading more by example now, who they get to become because they've sort of in some ways been given permission to use their voice and their gift, not to have to stay within their swim lane so much as to say, this is who I am and what I think I can bring forward to the business. So the series is to sort of watch the character over time so that anybody who follows it says, I wonder what happens next to this person. And well, this is what happened to the CFO. And look where the HR person ended up. And this sales leader who thought it was all about him at the time, well, he didn't make it. right? Because he forgot to look after his people at that particular time, and then someone was elevated. So that folks maybe get a sense of what's possible within their own organizations and or what's possible for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Which leads me, and thank you for that. And it leads me to a question that may or may not be answerable here, but just in the sense of, how have you personally applied this in your organization?
Yeah, man.
Organizations, but organizations specifically here.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. One I'm still in pursuit of.
That's kind of what I thought. That's why I said it may not be answerable in the sense that there's a finite place where I landed. It's just kind of, there's an evolutionary nature to this. I got a hunch.
I guess that's why the book series never ends, my friend, right? And so it's, and the application is what follows, and maybe where the genesis of Unopened Gifts comes from. It comes back to maybe being a bit courageous, if you will. As we all grow up in the great game of life, I am an Irish Catholic kid from Brooklyn, New York. And I think I touched on this maybe when we met first time, officially met. And, great thing, if you know anything about the Irish and the Catholic, the factory settings are high for guilt and alcohol. I met the quota early for alcohol. That's right. And I had it, I will say this positively, embedded into me in a very unhealthy way, Blaine, that I was a mistake, had nothing to say, and wouldn't amount to anything. And probably not the ideal conditioning for a young lad. I worked really hard to convince the big people in my life that was wrong. I think that's what led to the quest to build this exercise equipment business and have cash and valuable prizes and prove them wrong. And in reality, Blaine, I ran so hard for so long. I had one of those passports, and gosh, you could relate to this.
Recording passport, yeah.
Out of it. Because I figured if I slowed down, I'd have to face that conversation I didn't want to have, which was the one with myself, which was saying, look, they were probably right. You don't know what you're doing. And so I thought, in pursuit of something, I was actually running from something. And what I learned was, in terms of an unopened gift for me, and it still seems to be true to this day, is being told I had nothing to say. I think what I had to learn was the inverse of that no, you've been given a voice. But that voice is not to just speak about yourself, right? The ego side of things, the Superman capes I told you about earlier, but is to use your voice to help somebody find theirs. To, in some ways, give what I think most of us look for, permission to move forward with life, to have the approval of those that we view that could maybe make a difference in our lives. Or if I had to trust myself, I wouldn't do it. I'd play not to lose or play small. So the learning of the unopened gift really started, understandably, within me. I was fearful to say that, hey, because of this upbringing, which I was ashamed to talk about, it was actually training camp. If you look positively, right? So that was what I was supposed to go through to come to this perspective, to use the voice from a service perspective. And today you've given me the gift, Blaine, to be able to speak about that, not so people can learn, hey, let me tell you about me, is do you hear something in our conversation? Certainly I get a lot from just listening to you that gives the listener, the viewer, permission or a willingness to step forward, or know that courage isn't going to feel good if there's a relationship, a business, something they want to push forward in their lives, that maybe we can give ourselves permission. Or if nothing else, if I've been given a gift and somewhere along the line I get to the finish line and I get the question, whatever that room looks like, hey, dude, I gave you gifts. What'd you do with them? Right? I want to know that at least I unwrapped it.
Unwrapped it, yeah.
Right. And to some degree, I think many of us see it similarly. At least I've got more courage to talk about it now than I used to.
You mentioned something in describing that, Mac, that I hadn't heard before. That I'm very thankful and appreciative of you for mentioning it. And it's one of those things where I doubt if you even know what you said. I'll feed it back here because I think it's actually quite brilliant. And yeah, it speaks to a certain degree of awareness that I think is useful to actually curate. In the pursuit of success, I was actually running away from something.
Mm.
Yeah, and I work a lot with leaders that are highly driven. And you and I both know this game, and it's A-type personalities just take that hill, just run for it, and the pause that's required to be able to say what's really in play here gets to be an interesting move if you can curate an awareness that makes that possible. And feel free to answer or not answer this, but yeah, where did that realization that it's not so much the pursuit that's driving me as much as the movement away from something? What was there a catalyst that actually came into play here that then began to and I'm thinking here again of unopened gifts. Yeah, you're not going to notice the gift as long as you're just fixated on moving ahead. It's that pause that gives you license to say, wait a minute, there's something under the tree here. I hadn't really seen this.
I guess the person I was lying to most of my life was me, and I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So there was a number of events, or let's just say whatever powers that be, sent a lot of missions in to sort of wake me up. I got before they could get me. I got into the training station before they get a hold of me. And there was a couple of things. One, I knew when it was, as I say, cash and valuable prizes. Like anybody, you get the big house. Hey, this is great. Until you start getting the mortgage bills and the insurance bills come in, right? And the car in the driveway. And hey, we're going to fly private. And I thought all that stuff was important, but it was a Roman candle. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, providing economic benefit to those that were in the organization. What have you done for me lately? Hear it until I heard it. I was getting through the holidays, and what I didn't recognize until I did, maybe like anything, I was married once before, and I would take on this enormous stress and strain going through work. I would come into my own home environment, and I would suddenly listen to a loving spouse talk about their day and then the challenges, and I would sort of project onto that person, oh, here's more stress and strain, right? Mm-hmm. That I had to just master and manage. I didn't understand. To that point, also, what's really important to this one is I was told I wasn't lovable in so many ways that when I got married and affection became in copious supplies, I didn't know how to handle it. I pushed it away because I thought subconsciously I thought I didn't deserve it because that wasn't the model. I didn't see it, right? I didn't know it. And so there were those awarenesses that just came to me like on long runs. I got involved in doing long distance Ironman events. Again, running towards something, riding towards something, slow as it was. I tell people I work security, I work the back, right? There was no record times. And so in those moments when I couldn't escape, the awareness came in. There were groups, for example, I'm part of YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and you would very well know in that group, there's no impressing anybody. There's always bigger, faster, better. Just, come on, dude. And a few folks sat around me one particular day and said, dude, we're going to call you on your BS. Right? The only person you're fooling is yourself. Right? And, like anybody, I hate when that happens. But what I had created was you hear me say there's who you are, right? When it all starts out and who you wind up being. And these two identities get formed. This one gets built, reinforced, because this is who I want you to think I am. Yep. Further from who I really am. And I was tired of keeping both those individuals going. And I realized that it was never enough to perpetuate compensation, build market share, the next quest to conquer, much like the lead character in the book. And so fatigue set in. I was fearful of becoming my father from the perspective of spending an entire career in one business. And I thought I'd been enough developmental work known. I got to be willing to get out on the skinny branches and try something. That actually turned out to be a cliff. Right.
Wile E. Coyote comes into mind here.
Because when you have a big organization around you, people are going to, and you're doing things for others, people are going to take your phone call. When you become a man of one, the calls don't come back as fast. It's, so many transactions took place. So the net of it all is the hardest relationship for me had been learned was me.
Mm-hmm.
Guy I didn't know at all. Still learning. And it was that understanding of what I was afraid of, what I was trying to get to, what had been instilled in me, and to recognize that maybe there's an opportunity to come at it from a different way. Because if I came back to the recognition of you've been given a gift of voice, if you stay on this path, you won't perpetuate it the way you have the potential to. Mm-hmm. If you have the courage to try another way, you might not get there, but you won't be disappointed that you got on that road.
Right.
And so, in essence, it was me getting my arms wrapped around me, no longer pretending I was this individual. I had to learn to collapse those two, and recognize if you leave me because I'm becoming more who I am, then maybe you weren't with me to begin with, because that wasn't who I really was anyway.
I love it. I just know that this is true for you. That's translated into the way that you work with your clients.
Thank you. What's interesting about it, I would assume you and I could go into an organization, speak about what you're trying to get to, what's the market share, let's take a look at top line, let's look at your cost of goods, let's look at the margins here, right? What are your OpExs? What are you trying to project on your EBITDA performance? Let's look at how it breaks out. All those important components. And yet my experience has been the stuff that's getting in the way has a lot to do with the story the leader's telling themselves, he or she, that's perpetuated through the executive suite or C-suite and further down in the organization. The assumption is that people see it the way I see it as the leader, or they hear it the way I intend for them to hear it. And there's a gap in what is the type of organizational traction we get is when someone's willing to first say, use your phrase, co-created. No matter where I look in the organization, I'm the common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting how that works.
I got to take 100% of my 50%. And if then there's something I can do, I know I'd like all these other people to change, but maybe I first need to model that right in me. And that's where we have the most fun and the most success, and maybe the most tears.
Yep. There you go. Where can people find out more about what you're up to, Mac? You've got a website, so I'll just we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. Yeah, that would be sort of mission control, the website, and then there will be access to the social channels on there. So it's jamesmcpartland.com as you're kind enough to put in your show notes.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest I'd send them to your house.
That would be good too. Come on down. Although, your place in Coto de Casa, I've got a hunch is probably quite nice as well. So that's a lovely area.
Very blessed by the environment, and maybe in cases of the past where they've even taken those things for granted. Right? Yeah. And so guys like you coming across the path are no accident for me. You, Blaine, help remind me that to make sure that I'm practicing what I hope I'm able to illustrate in the lives of others I spend time with. And also, whether they call it angels or others, man, the work you do is quite inspiring. So as I move forward and I seek what can I tap in to make sure I maintain the juice, you've given me more than you know. Right? And I mean that professionally. I've not been stalking you. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying so. I get down in that neck of the woods fairly frequently. So we got to find a time to get together. Just sit down and have some coffee, sit long, talk much. I'd love that.
Be the ultimate gift, my friend. We'd happy to host you anytime you come this way, man. Thank you. And thank you for the gift of time today, because you opened a few for me today.
My pleasure. Folks have been listening to James McPartland, McPartland. I'm getting my tongue engaged here. Check it out on jamesmcpartland.com. And you will not be disappointed at what you find there. I've taken some time to just kind of poke around the website. There's some very interesting content in there. And he's got some good stuff that I think you would be very well served taking advantage of. So, Mac, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. As always, I'll sign off with just this admonition. Find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. When you take a look at how nature works, there's nothing in nature that serves solely as a center of accumulation. Everything is given away in some way, shape, or form at some point in time. So be that person. Be a part of nature. And thanks for listening to the show, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care. This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.